Thus says the Lord, the God of hosts is the Lord. In all your little towns there shall be wailing, and in all the streets they shall cry. They shall call the farmers to mourning. I will pass through the midst of you. I take no delight in the noise of your solemn assembly. Woe to you who desire the day of the Lord. Why would you have the day of the Lord? It is darkness and not light. Is not the day of the Lord darkness and gloom with no brightness in? I take no delight in the noise of your solemn assembly.
Well, welcome to Richmond, Virginia on day one of PCAGA 24, the 51st. You've heard this song before. I've told you about the difficulty of finding songs about General Assemblies. There just aren't any. Is anyone surprised by this? We are joined by three guests now, and there may be more, but we're very happy to have Brother Matt Fender with us. He served on the Overtures Committee, which is, the big deal, the first 2 days of PCA General Assembly. That's where a lot of the deliberation gets done. Matt, how are you?
I am very well, Brad, and it is a great privilege to host General Assembly here in Richmond this year. Normally I have to...
You live here?
I do. Normally I have to camp out in a hotel, and this year I woke up in my own bed and drove 2 miles to get here, so it was a grueling journey.
Well, we appreciate you making the sacrifice. And your own church is not far from here.
It is not. It is not. Our church is about 3 miles away, and I felt like my whole church was here today, volunteering in one capacity or another.
Well, that's encouraging to see, I'm sure. And you've assisted us with hosting our More in the PCA event tomorrow night?
That is correct. The event's going to be at the Commonwealth Club, which is a private club downtown here that I belong to, and it's terrific to be able to invite everybody in, and looking forward to a great event. I understand it is sold out.
Oh, okay. I haven't even heard that, and I'm on the board, so that's good. And anyone that might be able to squeeze a few more in. So if you see me tomorrow at the assembly, I've been comping a few people with a little "Don't Be an Urban" card, so that's appropriate. So we've had a full. We worked on the Overtures Assembly yesterday for most of the day. We didn't meet after supper. We had around 30 overtures, give or take, although some are duplicates to some extent, so you don't really debate 30 things. But how would you, as we won't debate those overtures really until Thursday, mostly. There may be a few that are voted on tomorrow, but how would you characterize the just what happened in the last day and a half? Because we finished at about, 11:30 today?
Yeah, we were done before lunch. Well, what I have been telling everybody, my capsule summary, is I felt like we ran the table. In other words, not only was it a smooth and fast committee, at least from my perspective, I was pleased with the outcome on everything. I thought it was absolutely terrific, and I couldn't have asked for more. The Lord was faithful.
The chairman was Steve Tipton, who's a teaching elder in North Florida, in the Panhandle, I think. Don't remember the name of the town and the church, but I don't remember anyone who's done a better job than he did. He was very capable and able, and we've had plenty of good guys do it, but that helped a great deal.
Steve did a fine job of moving us along. He was very even-handed as well. It's hard to, if somebody asked me, what am I looking for in the chairman of the Overtures Committee? Well, I want somebody who knows the rules, who can take charge and run the meeting well and sort of keep things in line, and who's fair and even-handed to all the speakers. And I thought Steve did all that with aplomb.
Yeah, with the number we had, it was speculated that we might do some work after dinner, even on Monday night. That didn't happen because of our good progress, and we finished by noon. Sometimes that committee goes into the evening into the afternoon of Tuesday, but we finished early today. So how would you characterize some of the more important overtures? There'll be one minority report on the sort of the redo of the background checks overture. I think there's going to be a minority report on that one. But how would you summarize it as far as, what should people look for on Thursday?
Well, I hadn't heard that there was a minority report on the background check overture. The one I'm familiar with was on the atheist testimony overture.
Yes, on the oaths and vows. Yes. Sorry, it's late.
It's all right. No, it's confusing. There's a lot of them. But, what happens every year is we get all these overtures in, and then helpfully someone, it's often been Howie Donahoe or Fred Greco, and this year I think Fred just did it on his own in consultation with others, gives us a proposed agenda, grouping them together by topic. Right, because we don't want to debate the same topic 5 times. A few years ago, we had 6 or 7 sexuality overtures. This year, there were 4 or 5 on the atheist testimony, or whatever it is. And so it's helpful to group them together. And then frequently what we've done is, for the folks that are proponents of the overture, we'll usually let them kind of have a say in, well, which one of these do you like the best? And we'll kind of put that one up to the top, and that's the one we'll debate. And it'll get amended. It might well have language from the others, but we're not going to have 5 different debates on the topic. So we'll debate that one overture, and whatever the outcome is, it's then customary to recommend answering the other overtures with reference to the one we debated. Right. So this year there were several of these atheist testimony things, but we ended up debating Overture 1, and it was a contentious debate, and there were arguments on both sides. I felt like the folks that were opposed to it, to changing the BCO to allow those who do not believe in a higher power or future state of rewards and punishments to testify in church courts, felt there was a theological issue, whereas the folks who were proponents of making the change were making more practical arguments. Sort of a consequentialist sort of argument, to borrow a phrase. And so in some ways, I felt like we just almost weren't addressing each other's arguments. But ultimately, the overture was defeated, but I understand there's going to be a minority report that's going to come to the floor, which will have the effect of putting the overture before the General Assembly anyway, such that the General Assembly could choose to propose it. Of course, the way our process works, a change to the Book of Church Order then has to go down, be approved by 2/3 of the presbyteries, and pass General Assembly again before it goes in the book. We are a conservative bunch, and we do not make it easy to change the Constitution.
So not all overtures require that 2/3 presbytery approval, because they don't request changing the Constitution. They may ask the Assembly to do something else or say something. Can you give us a heads up on a couple of those?
Yeah, well, so there is one intermediate step, that a change to the rules of assembly operation does make a change to the book, but the rules of assembly operation aren't part of the Constitution. So that can just be done by a vote of the GA in a single year. But then we also have these ones that are just sort of declarations. So this year we had Overture 13, which was to commend the letter we wrote last year on transgender surgery for minors. And that what happened was, last year the Assembly felt like we couldn't wordsmith a letter in the time we had available that was going to satisfy everybody. So instead, we authorized the moderator to appoint a commission to write the letter and then send it out, and it was then sent out by presbyteries and sessions to various local government authorities. But the Assembly itself, other than acting to its commission, never looked at the whole letter and said anything about it. So Calvary Presbytery brought an overture to commend that to everybody, and that was amended several times and then ultimately passed. But ultimately, what we're going to end up doing is just having a statement, a deliverance of the 51st General Assembly that says, yes, we like this letter. And similarly, there were a number of these overtures seeking to amend the Book of Church Order to require background checks of one sort or another for church officers. And there were some folks that were very passionate about that, and there were some others of us who were opposed to writing something like that into the book due to sort of vagueness of it and concerns about the civil magistrate and some other arguments. And so ultimately, it looked like that was just going to go down. And then Teaching Elder Fred Greco proposed a very helpful amendment to make it, rather than writing something in the book, we would just make a statement, a deliverance of the 51st General Assembly to say, hey, we recommend that you do a background check of some time. That would be a good idea. And I don't remember the exact language, but it was words to that effect.
Yeah, and we're in favor of background checks, and my church does it, and your church does it, and almost, I wanted to stand up and say, I'm in favor of background checks. In fact, the child protection policy that a lot of the churches of guys in that room, they got from our church years ago. My church pioneered child protection. We've been using background checks for a long time. But the argument against the overture was that there is no standard that would work nationwide. It's almost an irreducible complexity of different laws for keeping the records and what reports show. And child protection can never be just about background checks. There's more to that. it's not the be all and end all. It's a part of a bigger package, and I think that's one danger of focusing too much on the background checks. There's much more you should do besides that.
Well, I mean, a background check didn't help you if the offender wasn't caught before. So it certainly can never be comprehensive. And the other thing, I have some concern that folks can get a false sense of security. Some of these commercial background checks out there, it's like you hand somebody $10 and they hand you back a report and say, yeah, this guy's good to go, without giving you any information as to what did they check and where did they check and what information was really reviewed.
If only we had a lawyer to talk to. No, that's Matt's day job. So he might know something about this. So that was another thing. So it's going to be a recommendation more than a requirement for office. My argument against it, which I didn't raise, was it involved the taking of church property because it required money to be spent, and there's very little money you have to spend to be a PCA church. We're pretty sensitive about our property given the history of our founding or our leaving the mainline church. So that's another. But there was no need to raise that argument. What else struck you? Maybe the Overture 3, which was to constitutionalize, to recommend constitutionalizing the chapter of the book in the Book of Church Order, the section Directory for Public Worship on preaching.
Yeah, so that was Overture. There was 2 overtures on that. There was 3 and 29, and 3 was the one we debated, and we recommended answering 29 with reference to 3, as I explained earlier. But for the folks listening who may not be familiar with it, the Book of Church Order has 3 big sections, right? This is one of those questions that's always on presbytery exams and session exams. And the first one is the form of government. It lays out the structure of the church government. The second is the rules of discipline, which talks about how we handle various process and cases and things. And then the third is the Directory for Public Worship. And the first 2 are part of the Constitution. The third one, by and large, is not part of the Constitution, with a couple of exceptions. So there's a chapter on admissions of person to sealing ordinances and the sacraments, baptism and Lord's Supper is 3, and then part of the chapter on marriage. We did that, the General Assembly in Atlanta, whatever year that was.
2018. Sentence, actually.
That's right. So that said that PCA ministers who choose to solemnize marriages can't solemnize same-sex marriages. So, but that's the only parts of the Directory of Public Worship that have constitutional authority. The rest is only advisory. So this Overture 3, makes some slight amendments to Chapter 53 on preaching, and then would give it constitutional authority if it were adopted. And that was largely, I think, I didn't write it, and I won't put words in anybody's mouth, but in my perception, that was in response to the issue we had last year and are going to have again this year with Metro New York and a church up there that had a woman preach a Sunday morning sermon. And then the presbytery didn't, in my view, take sufficient action with respect to it. And we've now had one SJC case on that and another coming. And, I read on the floor of the Overtures Committee the response we got from the church and from the presbytery that was from the church, in which this church session claimed that their pastor told them this was okay because his understanding of the BCO was that women could preach occasionally. And I'm paraphrasing. That's not the exact language, right. So please don't somebody accuse me of violating the Ninth Commandment. The exact language is in the RPR report. You can read it for yourself. It's going to probably come up on the floor tomorrow during the RPR report.
All right, so we should quickly say that we do have a moderator, Steve Dowling, a ruling elder from Alabama. He chaired the Overtures Committee last year, and he seems to be off to a good start. But something happened tonight at the assembly that's related to the overture that, in a way, what ordained people can do, who can preach, who can be called a pastor or a preacher. We had an overture from last year, 26, item 1 on our docket this year, and you have to, and it was approved by a 4 or 5 to 1 margin by the presbyteries. And there seemed to be a coordinated effort to try to shoot it down at the beginning of this assembly because the steps are simple majority at one assembly for amendments, 2/3 of the presbyteries must approve, and then a simple majority at the next General Assembly, which this is the next General Assembly. And there was an effort to defeat that overture, which had to do with officer titles. Who could properly have the title pastor, elder, or deacon, and that also really touches on ordination and how seriously we take the Book of Church Order and what it says about those things. So it's sort of related. We know the Church of the Southern Baptist Church has a huge controversy over this right now, where they may be kicking out a couple hundred churches. I almost started a suggestion tonight. I sort of got the vibe that this might cause some churches to leave. There was something almost akin to, I don't want to say a threat, but it sounded to me like some of the people were so serious about this particular overture on officer titles, because they did want to call ladies deacons, or they wanted to call unordained persons of either sex deacons. There's some churches that don't ordain male or female deacons, and they just call them members of the diaconate. Were you surprised at the effort to defeat that overture? And what was your reaction to the debate there?
I was not surprised. I sort of anticipated it, because I was actually surprised it went through as easily as it did last year. But, sometimes, something happens quick and people don't have a chance to reflect on it as much. And I think that's the reason we have the process we do. And I wasn't surprised at all there were some folks trying to derail it. We've spent a lot of time the last 5 or 6 years arguing about the qualifications to become a church officer and adding stuff to the book, largely around the sexuality stuff. But there have been some other things too. And so it seems odd to me that we're going to make it harder to ordain somebody to qualify for church office. But then if we can just not do that and turn around and give somebody else the same title. And, I think that's very confusing to people. And somebody raised that on the floor tonight, and it almost rises to the level of almost, false teaching to me, that you're going to give somebody a biblical officer title who is not in fact an officer. Because let's face it, that most of the folks in the pew in our congregations, they haven't read the Book of Church Order, and they don't understand the distinction. Many years ago, my first PCA church was one that had what they called a joint diaconate, consisting of men and women. And when they went to ordain them, they would put the men in the back row and the women in the front row, and they put their hands on the shoulders of the men, but not on the women. So we didn't ordain the women. Well, the women didn't know they weren't ordained.
That sounds like ecclesial gymnastics to me.
It was for sure. It was for sure. So I think that sort of thing should be avoided. And I just wanted to point out on this whole business of women serving the diaconate, our Book of Church Order already has a provision for this. We have a provision where the session can appoint diaconal assistants who can be either men or women to serve the diaconate. We've got a perfectly fine title in the Book of Church Order that is available to these folks, that's not confusing, is in fact very clear. And so that was what I would commend to the folks that are concerned about it.
Yeah, some of the arguments were that in the Korean churches, this is a big deal because of some traditions they have. It's interesting, we didn't hear anything about that in the intervening months. It was kind of a new argument, and I don't remember that argument being made much last year. Maybe my memory fails me. But this has got to do with the concept of contextualization, being outward facing, appealing to maybe urban city culture. I think it's harder and harder in our culture today to have traditional ideas about the roles of men and women, or even that there is any such thing in particular. So but as I said, this draws a bright line around what we believe, and good fences make good neighbors, and good denominational people. And I think it's good to tell people on the front end, make it very clear that we don't do this, but we do this. And I think that prevents some pain and suffering. So anything else? There was nothing else dramatic tonight. Now there were. The vote was not. It was probably 60 or 70 in favor of the officer titles overture, and 35% against. And there was a line of, I'm going to guess, 150, 200 guys who recorded their no votes. Which is just, we allow that for conscience sake. It doesn't have any effect. There was no protest of the vote, but nevertheless, and it was mostly younger men who were doing that. So what that bodes for the future, I don't know, but it's still an active issue. It's still a source of conflict. And some of the men against the overture, actually admitted that they did everything that the overture sought to address. And I've written several things where I laid out these things and linked to church websites. And there was confirmatory, I don't know what you call it in the legal trade, confirmatory evidence there or something. And not exculpatory, but
Corroborating?
Yeah, there you go. We need the Law and Order sound effect for
Doink,
you.
doink.
Yeah. But anyway, it's interesting. It's still an unsettled issue, and we're going to hear more about it maybe in the courts in RPR or somewhere. But it seems to be sort of settled for now. I mean, in the law of the PCA, this is a settled issue right now.
Well, we've written the book. Now we got to see what happens.
Yeah.
Right? There's
Yeah.
going to be minutes reviewed. We'll probably have some things coming up to RPR. Are there going to be some exceptions of substance that start coming up if people see things on it? I don't know. That's for the future. Hopefully, folks will adjust their practices to conform to the book, and we won't have any of that. But we shall see.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on anything that's happened in the last day and a half?
Well, I think one other thing worth mentioning in the Overtures Committee was there were two different overtures proposing study committees. And I think I used this phrase in a speech on the floor of the Overtures Committee that I think a lot of us have study committee fatigue, and there is now a great resistance to new study committees. One of the proposed study committees was from an overture that I think was from an individual, from a single teaching elder, wanted to have a study committee on the book Jesus Calling. And the other was a extremely comprehensive overture proposing a study committee to essentially rewrite a section of the rules of discipline. And there were a couple unusual features to that one. One was that the overture itself named who the proposed members of the committee were going to be, and that's not something we normally do. It also was trying to avoid a funding objection by saying that the folks were going to be self-funded. And, CCB found a number of problems with this, one of which was that violated the RAO, which says that the expenses are supposed to be borne by the AC. That one did not really get much traction and went down pretty quickly. The Jesus Calling overture was amended by somebody in this room.
Zoe, what did you do? No, so it's no longer a study committee. It's simply a request to a couple of agencies to look into this. Agencies that have some historical relation or some by nature of the type of agency that CDM are basically our books, the people that have the bookstore and that sell our materials, they have expertise in content, in books and publishing. So yes, it's not really a study committee. It's just a request for permanent committees to do something. So we'll see. We'll see about that. But yes, study committees are not. They don't have a lot of prospects in the PCA of the 21st century, because we had a bunch of them for a while, and they're expensive, and that's why the administrative committee doesn't like them, because they cost money and they have to pay for it and manage them.
No, that's for sure. And I think particularly when it comes to something like these overtures on the rules of discipline, I didn't see a lot of value to a study committee. Some brothers want to get together and, think together and work up some overtures to make some changes. Well, we already know how to do that, right? You can get on a Zoom call for free and talk to the folks that you want to talk to, and then put in an overture. And that's what the Overtures Committee is for. So I felt like it was kind of a redundant and expensive and awkward thing that wasn't really going to serve us well.
Yeah, and sort of unpresbyterian, where you're taking the choice of the committee out of the hands of the body. You're sort of, I'm not saying stacking the deck, but you're preloading who was going to be on there. So By Faith, our denominational magazine, they have a Twitter account. They're doing a good job of giving the facts of what has happened. So check the website in the morning tomorrow. Look at the Twitter account as the day goes on, and you'll know. Maybe we've provided some helpful context. When people read these, they'll say, "Oh yeah, that's what they were talking about." But this is a live show at the end of the first real day of the assembly, and we're just trying to throw some a little bit of information out there to provide context and a little opinion as well, because this is Presbycast. That's what we do. So anything else before we move on, Matt? We don't want to keep you all night. I know you got miles to go before you sleep.
Yeah, I think about 2.5 miles, actually, yeah, as I'm from Richmond. But the only thing I might mention is, first thing tomorrow, we're going to have the RPR report.
That's Review of Presbytery Records. And it's a central part of Presbyterianism. We call it review and control. There's no point in being Presbyterian if you're not accountable to someone. And this is really our primary method of accountability.
It is. And so I think I may have spoken about this before, but ultimately what happens is, the presbyteries have to send their minutes up, and then a group of brothers work together to read those, and then we spend 3 days in Atlanta slogging through them and recommending, various items, citations with respect to those minutes. And there's 4 levels of that. The lowest level being a notation, which is, typically akin to a typo. Then you could have an exception of form, which suggests that you didn't document something correctly, but it doesn't. And there's precise language for these standards in the RAO. I'm just approximating. And then when you get to something a little more serious, and become an exception of substance. And once it's an exception of substance, it doesn't just go to the presbytery; it goes in the report to the General Assembly. And if the General Assembly passes it, the presbytery is required to write back and justify their actions. And sometimes there's multiple years of that sort of back and forth. And then the sort of final kind of nuclear option is to recommend a citation to the SJC under BCO 40-5. And we had a couple of those last year. And there's a couple recommended this year. One is round 2 of Metro New York, finding that their prior response after the SJC ruling is inadequate. Another one that is, I think, very significant in light of the comments you made earlier about property is a recommended citation against Columbus Metro. So there was a letter received by the stated clerk that he referred to RPR, where a member or former member of a church alleges that the presbytery involuntarily shut down his church and seized its property. And our view was that that was a credible report of a grossly unconstitutional proceeding, and therefore we ought to recommend a citation. Now, who knows? I offer no opinion on whether that's true, but our view was that the letter itself was a credible report, and therefore we needed to act. And so that's going to come before the Assembly tomorrow to be voted on, and I think is an interesting matter. And I'll be interested to see what the Assembly does.
Yeah, credible report is the language in the standard, and it shows that even a former member has access via this method, what we call 40-5 in our shorthand, to, we do take reports seriously and we investigate them, or we ought to. But we don't suggest that there are no mistakes made and that every report is founded, certainly. So I thank you for being with us, Matt. And this is an interesting place, Richmond, and the facilities that we're meeting in are actually very very nice. But I've noted that downtown Richmond's sort of like downtown everywhere else we've been. About half the restaurants are closed, and there aren't a lot of people who work in buildings anymore, apparently. So that's 2024.
Well, I've worked downtown here for 16 years. And one of the things that I've noticed is a lot of the restaurants have a hard time making a go of it because people don't come down here on the weekend. So you're trying to make your whole living off lunch 5 days a week. And so now there are some places over here on Gray Street a block away. There's some places that serve dinner, and it's starting to be some improvement in that regard. But still, it's a tough thing. Not many people live downtown to convince folks to come downtown for dinner. So we're thankful for the folks that are here operating restaurants and serving us while we're here at General Assembly.
Yeah. Well, thanks for being our host, and thanks for speaking to us tonight. And we'll talk to some of these other fine people. You're welcome to hang around or go get something better to eat or drink than we have. But it's been good being with you today.
Thanks so much, Brad.
All right, thanks. You can pull that off, Matt, and we'll hand it to. Let's see. Zoe, go ahead and put that on. We'll give Zoe a headset, and then we've got a mic we can pass around with our other guests, and just don't get real rustly with that. Good mic hygiene. But we'll call on you in a minute. And you'll pick that up. But Zoe, let's see. Are you with us there, Zoe?
I think so.
Floor clerk extraordinaire. I didn't know you were going to serve as a floor clerk. I thought now being married to a pastor, you would graduate from that into some sort of matriarchal status or something.
Your pastor actually said that to me earlier today. So
I can't believe we think the same.
That's just unimaginable. But you're not the first people to say that to me. I wonder if I should retire just because now, I am who I am.
Well, maybe you're just not very good at it.
Yeah, maybe I'm not.
You're the only floor clerk wearing a skirt, though.
That is true. But I'm not the only lady floor clerk.
Okay.
I don't think I have been for the last couple of years.
So anyway, we'll talk to you more. You got here kind of late, but you're supposed to be sending some of our tweets out.
Yes.
And I haven't judge. I haven't evaluated your production yet.
Well, there hasn't been much in the way of production, partially because I didn't realize that at the moment at which it would be most convenient to tweet is also the moment at which I need to be handing out papers or counting votes. So if the assembly will permit delayed analysis from me, that will be fine. But I also need to sleep. We had a red eye from Portland to JFK last night, and I did not get a lot of sleep on that flight. So
we have a new tradition at the beginning of the assembly. The clickers don't work, and we have to do it the old-fashioned way by voice vote or standing. And but they fixed it, it seems. So it happens. It seems to happen every year.
John Bice's comment, "Heavenward Brothers," was one of the funniest responses to the
to
clicker
hold the
problem.
clickers up.
Yes, heavenward.
Yeah. All right. Well, so Derek, we got our friend Derek Bright with us. If you'll pick up that microphone, and we'll see if you can use it properly. But so you're from the metropolis of Aliceville, as many of our listeners know.
Yeah, the great big city.
And you're in the big city of Richmond now, so you probably feel a little out of your element.
Yeah, a little bit. It's weird having. First of all, it's weird having restaurants. Period. But
I'm sure you've got a Piggly Wiggly, and they may not have that here.
Sadly enough, when I first moved to Aliceville about 5 years ago, the Piggly Wiggly closed. God has written Ichabod over our town, and the Piggly Wiggly went down. So it's very sad times in Aliceville for sure.
All right. So, any thoughts on the first day and a half?
Yeah, I was very encouraged.
I'm sorry. I'm always bleary at this point.
Yeah.
You were on the Overtures committee as well.
Yes.
You weren't just in the room visiting. You were there.
No, I was.
You were sitting behind me, so I couldn't see you.
Yeah, I was there.
So we weren't in cahoots, obviously, if I'm not even sure you were on.
That's true. That's true, yeah. No, I was very encouraged, and I thought that even the speed of the Overtures committee, I felt like was really, it was nice for a lot of us because it gave us hope that, hey, we're going to get out of here at a decent time and get some good work done. And we were able to plow through some of the less controversial overtures and spend more time on things like the Directory for Public Worship. So I was very encouraged overall. And I will say, maybe as a negative, because, it's me. I've got to have something negative to say. Some of our brothers need to perhaps run their arguments by some friends that have taken some logic and rhetoric.
I thought you were going to say AI.
Yeah, AI might help them too. It's not an easy thing to go to the mic. I've been to the mic and on the floor, and sometimes you get flustered, and I understand that. But there are some, they would do well to maybe run their speeches by some others. But besides that, I thought it was very encouraging, and I look forward to the rest of the week.
Someone told me to turn my mic up, so it's the nature of my voice, and I don't have all the processing on with this mobile kit. But maybe you can hear. We'll fix it in post, as they say. Yeah. So, Derek, what overtures made an impression on you?
Yeah, there was actually a couple, and I'm not just saying this because he's in the room, but I was on the fence about the atheists being able to give testimony, which I think I've told you that before. I kind of went back and forth, and there were two arguments that swayed me. One was that somebody. In fact, I got a text message about this regarding Westminster Confession, chapter 22, which pretty much sealed the deal for me on that. But then when Matt Fender got up there and dropped the mic basically with his great line of atheists are by nature liars, that wasn't just rhetorically well stated, but it was a very true statement according to Scripture, and one that I think swayed me over. So I was impressed by that, and I was, of course, when we're speaking about the Director of Public Worship and the chapter on preaching, I was really encouraged by the arguments in favor of that. I was thankful that it passed. I think that we have in many cases in our denomination, perhaps an unhealthy view of preaching and the nature of preaching. And I think a chapter like this helps everyone have a higher view of the preached word. And so, yeah, I would say those two overtures in particular stood out to me as particularly, impactful, I guess, for me.
So, what do you expect the debate to be like on? I suppose it'll all be on Thursday.
Yeah, depressing. No, I'm sorry. It's late. People are probably thinking, "God, this guy's always negative." But no, I think it'll be a healthy debate. I expect it to pass on the floor. I expect both of those things to pass. I think you'll hear. I think you'll hear some arguments that will be strong, and you'll hear some that you wonder, have you actually read the chapter on preaching in the director of public worship? And I would say this, that if you read that chapter, there's really nothing objectionable in there that any Reformed and Presbyterian minister should have any kind of exception to. It's a very basic chapter on preaching, and really doesn't give, it gives you some guidelines, but it doesn't say your sermons have to be structured in 3 points, 4 points, whatever the case is. Somebody made the argument in committee that the chapter would, exclude the sermons of Jesus, and which was remarkable to me, because Jesus was an expository preacher. He did expound the text. He expounded the Old Testament law, which is certainly consistent with the chapter. So I think the debates will be good. I actually don't expect the debate to go very long. In all honesty, I think there's enough support for the chapter on the in the assembly. At least that's my read of it. That I think we'll have a few speeches, and then we'll have the question called, I'm sure, and move straight to a vote.
All right. Well, I think a number of people have watched the live stream. I don't know that we get numbers on that, but my wife actually went back to the hotel and watched the live stream, which is probably a pretty good move. But I'm sure some of our live viewers have been watching. In that, it's a big old room that we meet in, and you're a long way from everything. So it's we'll get used to it. The room for overtures was the best we've ever had. Very convenient. Lots of space for non-members to view. It wasn't sometimes it's standing room only, but these are open. There were doors open out into the concourse. So this is not a secret meeting. It's very much open to everyone. So there's nothing done in a corner in our process.
No, and I would actually say one of the things that I wish more people saw or witnessed is you see a lot of working together and hands going across the aisle, so to speak, in overtures. You've got a lot of times you have guys who, maybe they came in with different positions, but you see them during the debate walk over to each other at the table and writing things down and working and crafting things. And you actually see people from, you could say, both sides or of the aisle.
Let's say there are very fine people on both sides.
There are very fine people
agree?
on both sides. And you see people working together. And I think that would be a great encouragement. I would encourage elders that if you've never served on overtures, I would try to go for that because you learn a ton. And your first year, which this is only the second year I've done it, your first year is a little bit of baptism by fire. You're kind of just in there trying not to screw anything up. You're just sitting there quietly letting more seasoned men lead you the way. But you learn a lot, you see a lot. And the other thing I would say about it is I've been impressed both years I was on overtures, this year and last year, with the chairman. That is a difficult job, and you really have to know your parliamentary procedure well, especially when you've got men who are well versed in parliamentary procedure, you could really get caught up, and it can be an intimidating thing. But Steve Tipton, I thought, did a great job, and this week and then last year, Dowling did a great job as well. So it's not an easy thing to do. It's a bit of a grind, but I really was encouraged by the whole meeting.
All right, very good. Will, I'm gonna mute you for the moment. When you're holding that mic, hold it up on the mic part. Don't put your hand around the bottom there. You cut out a little, and I think that'll solve that. So, Zoe, do you have any reflections on what we've seen and heard thus far?
I was kind of surprised that the re-upping of the overtures from last year took so much debate as it did.
Well, it was just the one.
Well,
It was just one. There were 3 passed, 2 were totally non-controversial, and
I'm just surprised that it got so much debate because I remember the
what
similar.
was it? 15 minutes. I think it was a 15-minute limit.
Yes.
Yeah.
But for some reason, those 15 minutes just seemed really long, and I'm not sure if it was the nature of the arguments that made it seem like such a long period of time. But if I remember correctly, it's quite unusual that we've had that much debate on overtures that have come back around after a successful year in the presbyteries. I don't think that happened last year, if I remember right.
Well, about 3 years ago, there were a few that passed like that were shot down, and it was sort of came by surprise. This was not a total surprise. What it tells you is that there's still a lot of, a few hundred guys there tonight, maybe based on the votes and the people who recorded their no votes. There are still people that feel very strongly about this. It's like it's a non-negotiable, or it's a necessary part of their ministry and the way they conceive of their church and the way they present it. And
Which we heard from the floor.
yeah, and that may be a problem going forward. I mean, that this may suggest some things about the future of the PCA, and it may not. We've had other issues that we sort of got beyond and sailed past, but this is it's 2024, which is
Yes.
there.
It is current year. So
And we
there's
should
really-
say, I mean, it was public. The state clerk kind of apologized again and recounted his previous apologies for the whole the French connection and disconnection, as I've called it. David French being invited to be part of a panel, which was canceled when it proved very controversial. And I thought the state clerk was gracious, and I guess I don't know that I expected him to bring that up, but he did. And
I was surprised to hear him address that from the floor. And at first I was wondering where he was going with it, but it was very humble. I appreciated what he said. I also thought it was interesting and not inaccurate that he said that his decision was also controversial. So he was kind of acknowledging that there were 2 sides to it. There was outcry over the panel in the first place, and there was outcry over the cancellation of the panel, and there was also outcry over his apology for the cancellation of the panel. So nobody was going to be the winning party, and somebody was going to have lost that battle.
yeah,
But
it's probably not going to be mentioned on the floor again because it doesn't touch on anything that we'll be doing. But there's an underlying current of discontent and stress connected to that. Although we didn't see it in the Overtures Committee, I don't think, Derek. That was very congenial, and you do have to work together. I mean, it's not a battlefield. It is a collaborative effort most of the time. So
I wonder if you'll see more cooperation because overtures actually requires more work than perhaps speaking to an overture on the floor of the assembly.
yeah, if you don't get along, if you can make your life hard. There are pragmatic benefits to working together and helping each other. And what Derek said, we do help each other, and Fred Greco helps everyone.
Yes, he does.
And I was beginning to think tonight that we needed to bring a hook to just get Fred out of there because he just no one's enjoyed being a moderator as much as Fred, and it was almost like he didn't want to go.
I don't know if anyone will ever.
Yeah, when we were when we were applauding him in his service after he received that plaque, you could see he almost looked sad as he was saying thank you and walking down the stage. He just seemed like, and then as soon as he was able to, get back up to give that report, he was
back.
Johnny on the spot. So, that was I will say, going back to the Brian Chappell thing, I think that I appreciated what he said. I think it's very unfortunate that our assembly, it seems like the past few years, maybe even longer than that, but there always seems to be some cloud of controversy surrounding it. And I think that contributes to a lot of the negativity going back and forth between sides. And I hope that we can, maybe next year have a much quieter assembly. I do have one question for Zoe, though. Now that she's married, all right, and you were in worship tonight, did you have a head covering on?
Oh, I am going to exercise my Fifth Amendment rights there.
Just her hair.
Which was quite short my first assembly round. I think it's been longer every assembly since. So you can thank my husband for that.
So, Derek, let me ask you to hand the mic to Jack over there, and we're going to talk to someone you've never heard. We have something old, something new, something borrowed, and something blue.
Something who invited herself.
I don't know who that would have been.
Can't imagine.
But we've made a new friend, and his perspective on all this might be very interesting because he's new to this. Although he's been on the margins. He's been over in the promised God's country, Scotland, studying. And Jack, just introduce yourself and tell us why you're here.
Who am I?
So you all aren't old enough to remember Matt will. Ross Perot was running for president, and he nominated this guy named Admiral Stockdale as his vice president. And at this debate, vice presidential debate in '92, I think, his first words were, "Who am I? Why am I here?" And it was hilarious. And Jack, who are you and why are you here?
I'm Jack Smith. I live in Pearland, Texas right now with my wife, Whitney, and our daughter, Waverly, who's 15 months old.
Hold on. Did you name her after the Walter Scott novel?
Thank you. Yes, the Walter Scott novel, which the train station in Scotland in Edinburgh is named after. And so everyone in Edinburgh thought we just named her after a train stop, basically. And so it didn't quite connect as well. So I'm glad you got it. Yes, I'm Jack. I live in Pearland. We've been back in the States for only about 6 weeks at this point.
Oh.
Came back from Edinburgh, Scotland, where I was doing a PhD there. And originally, I'm from California. You'll have to forgive me for that. From California, I grew up in a Baptist kind of EV-free background. Anyway, it's a long story of how I got from there to here. But PresbyCast was a part of that. And so being here now on the other side of it is really cool. So,
well, get the mic up a little closer.
Yep.
This is sort of how we met Zoe 4 years ago or 3 years ago.
Yeah, this is very familiar.
Yeah. So this is not self-promotion. It's just interesting. We've got a mutual friend who his son, and they were studying over there in Scotland as well. And,
that's right.
So
that's right.
It was almost implied that you became a Presbyterian listening to PresbyCast on a couple's double date. Something like that.
I've never heard that version of the story before, but I went to the Master's Seminary in California, and through that process, basically became convictionally Presbyterian while I was still there, and I felt God's call to ministry, and I realized I have. My whole background is in the Baptist world. I've been trained in a Baptist seminary. I was working for Grace Community Church, and I realized I feel called to the ministry, but I have no connections in the Presbyterian world. And I might understand a little bit of, Reformed theology, but there's so much more that goes into being a Presbyterian minister. So I was like, I'm going to go to...
You're correct.
Yes, I'm going to go to the mothership, go to Scotland, and just spend some time I'm sitting in a cubicle reading some Reformed books to figure out what this thing is. And so that's where I met Arthur Rankin over there. That's how I got connected to Duncan Rankin. And Duncan and I began to talk, and he kind of began to mentor me and begin to fill in all the gaps of what it means to be a Presbyterian minister. And one day he sends me an email and basically says, how soon can you get over here? There's a church in Pearland, Texas that needs help. And so we came as quickly as we could.
So you'll be seeking licensure in the PCA?
Yes, I was in the free church, and I was preaching in the free church, and I'm pursuing licensure in the PCA, and then hopefully be ordained, hopefully sometime soon. Yeah.
So you were just kind of a generic Reformed. You didn't know what you were for a while, and you figured it out.
Yeah, well, I grew up in a very Arminian, anti-Calvinistic. John Calvin was a bad guy. And anyway, through my time in college, I realized maybe John Calvin actually isn't that bad of a guy, kind of listening to your classic people like, your John Pipers and people like that, and realized, oh my goodness, these people are Calvinists. And yet they seem to be preaching the Bible. And just through reading things like Romans, I remember where I was when I read Romans 8, Romans 9, and I felt like my whole life had changed. And everything that I thought I knew, I realized I had become a Calvinist all of a sudden. And I was very involved in ministry at the time and realized I need training. I don't know what I'm doing. And so I ended up going to this conference. It was actually a biblical counseling conference at a Reformed Baptist church. And I had basically never heard preaching that had a high view of Scripture, a high view of the church, a high view of the sovereignty of God. And it was like I'd just been hit by a truck, basically.
Choke up on that mic, and
Yeah.
it'll sound better. There you go.
Yeah, my parents were there, and we or something. We had never experienced something like that before.
I lost you for a minute there. Let me see.
Okay.
Maybe we're in. All right. So you did you consider staying in Scotland to minister?
Yeah, it was definitely a possibility of
I tell
staying.
you what, actually, I've lost you altogether. Bring me that mic, and we'll work on it, and then we'll get you back on. Let me see if we maybe changed.
I can relinquish the headset if necessary.
Yeah. Maybe I'm just not hearing it. That's
I
weird.
can hear the mic.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know why I've lost it, but that's fine. If they can hear, pass the mic back to him. Oh, I know what I did. Okay.
Okay, we're all
This
good.
is live radio. So continue with your strange journey.
Anyway, yeah, so that was the first time I kind of heard real expository preaching, is the way I would put it. And I, at that point, thought the only context I had ever heard that in was in the context of this biblical counseling type movement. And so I thought that must be it. And so I went up to each speaker and said, who are you and where did you come from and how do I find more of you? How do I learn to do? And I was very involved in campus ministry at this time. And they all said, go to the Master's Seminary. So I said, okay, I'll go to the Master's Seminary. And I went there and I realized this is not just biblical counseling. This is just a high view of Scripture, a high view of the sovereignty of God, a high view of the church. And anyway, through that process, just continued to learn, just fell in love with the Bible, love for the church. And all of my systematic theology classes, we'd read Reformed people. And so I'd go into it reading it and basically became convinced of Presbyterianism through reading just Reformed people in seminary.
So you're going to throw your lot in with the PCA.
That's right.
But you've come in cold to this General Assembly.
Yep.
What have you seen?
Well, it's fun to be here, and especially to be here on the first night, because I've kind of been getting to know the PCA from Scotland, largely through Arthur, Duncan Rankin, and Presbycast. And so to be here and to be in the Overtures committee this morning, where I showed up at 8 because I mistakenly thought it started at 8. So I thought, okay, there are 15 people in the Overtures committee. Apparently, this is a tiny group. So I moved all the way to the front because I thought I'm not going to be the weird guy sitting all the way in the back.
Yeah, you were sitting in the.
I was sitting at a very ambitious position for someone who's a visitor at this thing. And as people began to fill in, I realized, oh my goodness, I'm like in the war zone of this thing. So it was baptism by immersion into the Overtures committee. And anyway, it was cool to see all the things that I've been hearing, see it played out, especially, I mean, encouraging things like a upholding of preaching, voting on that, emphasis on preaching, and just realizing it's a denomination like we've been talking about that has tensions as well, that has, I've heard about these disagreements, and then to see, the people that actually do disagree with these things.
Okay, you saw it live.
Yeah, I saw it live.
And we should, I meant to mention this earlier, and I think Matt and Derek, who don't have mics now, would agree. I think maybe we might have had the finest worship service at General Assembly that we've ever had tonight. It was an excellent Reformed worship service. I don't think there's any doubt about that. So that we don't always have, Jack, worship services that are like that, and the second and third one this week won't be just like that. But usually the first night is pretty traditional, air quotes. And I'd never heard Fred Greco preach, and he can preach. He's not just a moderator; he can preach. So I would tell you that I don't know. I nearly teared up a couple of times today. It's just weird. Sometimes when you think this is what I believe, and this is what we're actually doing. It's really it's really happening. Well, and at the I'm on the Interchurch Relations Committee. And hearing those fraternal delegate reports, and we're going to have some live ones this year. We're going to have 3 or 4 guys address us tomorrow, briefly, and that's where I nearly teared up was the hearing from these guys from Peru and Mexico and other places, and sister NAPARC denominations. Most of them were there. Bob Godfrey's son was there for the URC, and we had the RPCNA, and we had Chad Van Dixhorn, the permanent fraternal delegate for the OPC, and it was all very good. And we'll hear some of those tomorrow, so that's good. Watch the live stream in the morning. Hear from 2 or 3 fraternal delegates. We sort of kicked them off the island for time reasons, but we're bringing them back in. Jack, any questions about anything weird today? Or
that's a good question. I don't think there's no questions that stand out to me about what happened. I'm just excited to see the rest of the week, and like you said, it was just fun coming from the background that I do to see Presbyterianism in action, and to see all these people who really believe these things getting together and crafting these things so carefully, and the words matter. And I just felt like a kid in a candy shop all day seeing Presbyterianism in action. And I called my wife and was like, I just don't understand, how, the independent Baptist churches, there's just such a safety net and protection system built into Presbyterianism that just makes your heart sing a little bit. So it was fun to see.
Yes, we're nothing if not a safe zone, a safe space here for something. Anything, Matt or Derek, you want to share? We can pass the mic over to you if that's the case. Any further thoughts?
Brad, I just want to respond briefly to your comment about the worship service and commend my dear friend and brother, Roland Rick Hutton, who chaired the worship committee.
I met him, yes.
And I served with him on the session at All Saints Reformed Presbyterian Church. And I would suggest to you the liturgy you saw today looks an awful lot like the liturgy you might see if you were to come worship with us at All Saints Reformed Presbyterian Church.
Well, that's good. Derek, any thoughts on the worship and that sort of thing?
No thoughts on the worship, other than I will say that, actually, I have one thought now that I think about it. I really appreciated how the man administered the Lord's table. He gave, I think, a pretty thorough explanation of it from what I heard. And
it was almost a second sermon.
It was almost a second sermon, and
but we have that in my church every once a month, so I get it.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I do something similar, maybe not quite as long, but fairly long. So I did appreciate that, because sometimes, admittedly, when we've had the Lord's Supper at GA, I've kind of thought that maybe they rushed through it, or maybe there wasn't the fencing of the table, or words of administration were wonky. This was you could tell this man has done this many times and really believed what he said, and there was something special about that. And the worship services are always special together when we can come, and that's one of the places and one of the few times in the assembly that people who disagree strongly, there's something sweet about coming together with brothers that you disagree with and taking communion and sitting under the preached word. Of course, that's a beautiful thing and a beautiful part of our polity and our structure.
Yeah, and we sang a psalm tonight, and we sang 3 hymns that most people knew. And boy, don't people sing louder when you do that? It's just amazing how that works. It's like, you sing a cappella every now and then, and everybody says, "Oh, that's great. But let's never do it again for 6 months," or something. It makes that much sense. So yeah, it's if you go to all the worship services, Jack, you'll see some more diversity. But it was a good service tonight. And if you want to know whether Presbyterians are evangelical and biblical, I would tell you to go listen to the Fred Greco sermon from tonight, because I was thinking my Baptist dad would love this, and it wasn't a Baptist sermon; it was just biblical, and that was the title, that was the theme, the biblical commitments that we have.
I have a question. I came in a little late, so I may have missed this, so you can tell me if I did. But there's been a lot of discussion about the background check overture, and I'm wondering, before I got here, Matt, did you address any of those things? Okay, I'll go back and listen to that. I was, just for our listeners, I would commend whatever comments he made, because I thought that he, as well as another brother who is a ruling elder and a lawyer, gave very good explanations. A lot of these things are not as cut and dry as media outlets would cause you to believe. It's somebody writes an article and says, well, of course we should have background overtures or background check. I'm sorry. That should be something we should all do. And like you said earlier, I think everybody does background checks. But it's not just as simple as let's put something in there and all the problems are going to be solved. There are, legal reasons that maybe we want to not pursue that, maybe some wisdom from some other brothers. So I just want to commend that to you, that, these things are handled with care, and we all want to do what's right for our people and for the church. But we've got to do the right thing the right way. And I think that was accomplished today in Overtures.
All right. Well, I think we won't go much longer than this, because, you got to have time to listen to this tomorrow and then get on the live stream and watch what's actually happening. So I will tell you that from all sources, and some of it's just Twitter views of the video and YouTube, 712 people have experienced at least a little portion of what we've done tonight. It's very unlikely there'll be anything tomorrow night, because we'll have a late event. But Thursday night, maybe a wrap-up show. Very, very likely that we'll do that. So just stay tuned. And who knows, we might do some short videos tomorrow. I like to do Zoe, this is an idea for you. I like to do a walk, get on Twitter, hit go live, and walk through the assembly hall to show how big it is. But they were keeping people out today until it was ready to go. But the security here is very polite and attentive. And if you're not supposed to go somewhere, they don't let you go there.
They're very nice about it, though.
Yeah, I said that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I hope this has been interesting to someone for some reason. We'd hope Presby might be able to join us, but that turned out not to be the case. A late start, but necessarily because we did business until almost 10 o'clock. We'll probably do another show with Jack one day, where he can tell us a little bit more about his authentically broken faith journey. We love to talk. We love to use words like that.
That's a need. We need a whole show.
We need more brokenness and all that.
We don't have enough.
No. No. Just maybe not even just the right amount. We need more. That's true. So stay tuned. Zoe will be tweeting more tomorrow. I haven't tweeted much because I've been really busy, and thankful my wife came with me. She's been a great help and comfort, and it's great to have her here. And everyone loves to meet her. When they meet her, they say, "We're praying for you." I don't know why they say that. It's like it gets mean after the 100th time that someone says that.
Well, that's weird because that's what people say whenever they meet Seth. So I don't know how to feel about that.
Okay, well, now I don't feel good at all. All right.
And say my wife's here.
Oh, let me turn you on. Okay.
So, my wife's here, and they never say we're praying for you. They just say I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
So
I think that's even
the
worse.
prayer and just say I'm sorry.
I think it's worse.
Maybe I
She
don't have
said-
it so bad.
Earlier, I think it was BL said that to her earlier, and she said, I've heard that a lot so far these past couple of days. Everybody said that to me, so
Yeah.
I don't know what's going on there.
That means you're a piece of work. All right. Well, I want to thank all of you for joining with us. And we're going to play the only song in the world about solemn assemblies. This is actually taken from my Amos. It'd be a good project to look up in Amos the verses to this weird song from a weird Lutheran from the late 60s. And there it is.
And righteousness like ever flowing stream.